Perfect. I just want to confirm that we've met quorum.
We have, yes.
Perfect. And then I will start with the land of acknowledgement, okay?
Mhm.
So the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kma'ki people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. And then if I do a roll call, obviously it's me. Can I then say Andrew? Is Andrew here?
Present.
And then is Councillor Smith here?
He may be joining a little bit later.
Okay. And then Councillor Iona? Later?
She is in the meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Perfect. And then Daryl?
Present, I am here.
Okay. And then Jerry? Okay. And then Map?
We don't have maps at this time.
And then Missy, Renee, and Taylor?
Present.
Okay. Perfect. So I just want to remind the members to mute their mics when they're not speaking, so we don't get any feedbacks or background noise, I guess. I want to invite NCO staff to recite the affirmations.
So that would be me. So good evening, everyone. So we acknowledge that African teachings, strength, and perseverance continue to challenge and inspire our communities. If we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our many ancestors.
And minutes of approval from August 15th. Does any members have any errors or omissions in the minutes of August 15th, 2024? Okay. Since there's not been any errors or omissions brought forward, then can I have a mover and a seconder for approval of the minutes?
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay. Andrew seconded. And then Councillor Iona
Moved.
moved. Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
15th has been approved as approved. All those in favor say yay, and all those opposed say nay.
Yay.
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 Okay. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions.
Yep, Madam Chair, we don't have any additions, but we do have a deletion that Dorothy mentioned earlier to you today. Item 9.1.2, the ANSIO monthly update, that's been requested by staff to be withdrawn for this evening.
Okay, perfect. Do members have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay. Since there's nothing to be added, then can I have a mover and a seconder for approval, that the agenda has been approved as presented?
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And then seconder?
Seconded.
Perfect. Daryl and Councilor Iona, moved and seconded it. So all those in favor say yay, and then all those opposed say nay.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, perfect.
Yay.
Yay.
The motion has been carried. Perfect. 4, business arising out of the minutes. There's no business arising out of the minutes. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Does any member want to declare conflict of interest as a result of an agenda item? It doesn't seem like anybody wants to, I guess. Okay. I'm gonna move to the next agenda item. Consideration of deferred business, none. 7, correspondence, petition, and delegations. Krista, has there been any correspondence received by the clerk's office?
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, perfect. Has there been any petition received by the clerk's office?
There have been none.
Perfect. And then do members have any petitions? So if there's none, I'm gonna move on to the next agenda item. So we're talking about presentations and there's none. And then 8 is information items brought forward. None. There are no information items brought forward for this meeting. 9 is reports and discussion. Can I invite Leah Perrin, manager of the regional planning, Ancon, supervisor of transit planning, to provide a presentation to the committee? Is it today? I believe it is. Perfect.
Yep, we're here.
Thank you.
Okay, so bear with me 1 second. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen. And once I do, I don't think I'll be able to see you anymore. So 1 second. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen okay? And hear me
Yes,
okay?
looks good.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Just need to move some stuff around here. All right. So yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to present to you tonight. My name is Leah Perrin. I'm the manager of regional planning with planning and development here at HRM. And I'm here tonight with Khan Rahman, who's the supervisor with the transit planning group at Halifax Transit, also at HRM. And we were asked by your committee to speak to how transit planning works in HRM and how it works for African Nova Scotian communities and people. So we have a short presentation and we'll be happy to take your questions at the end. So just a quick outline of our presentation. I'm going to speak at a very high level to our regional plan and HRM and sort of how planning policy helps us think about where transit goes in the municipality and how it's kind of aligned with our where everyone lives and works in the municipality. And then Khan will speak a bit to the specifics of the transit planning process and how it works today. And then I'm going to conclude the presentation with a kind of very brief discussion on our work in regional planning on the African Nova Scotian Community Action Planning and how it can help us to think maybe differently as we move forward as we're reviewing our plans. But I'll save that to the end. So as I mentioned, I'm the manager of regional planning. So as you might have guessed, that means that I'm responsible for our regional plan. And what is that? I can certainly come back at another time and give you a whole rundown of our planning framework in HRM and how we do land use planning. But I'm going to keep it at a really, really high level today. So the regional plan is it's our kind of highest level planning document. It's that vision for the whole municipality. It's really at a strategic level, thinking about our settlement pattern, where we're growing and developing and what that means in the long term. So it's really a long-term strategic plan. It asks how we should organize our communities, and it sets out a vision for where and how future development will happen. There's sort of major areas in that regional plan that we plan for as a municipality. So some of those things are housing, mobility. So transit is certainly part of that, but also our roads, walking, cycling, active transportation, all of that. How we plan for and with the environment and respecting climate change is a key component of our regional plan. We also really look at culture and heritage. So that's, heritage properties like the physical buildings, but also cultural landscapes, how we plan for and with African Nova Scotian communities, Indigenous communities. And then the sort of planning of infrastructure and services is a really critical piece. So we know we're growing really quickly in the municipality. So how do all these pieces fit together? How do we, build a community that has a lot of services that are coordinated in some way? So everything from water and wastewater, we coordinate with Halifax Water, Parks and Recreation. So we work with our Parks and Recreation colleagues on recreation facilities, community centers, libraries. We also work with the province and other agencies on things like schools, or even Nova Scotia Power on their infrastructure needs. So, we're growing and we need to invest in all these different things. So transit is kind of one component of this bigger picture that's all integrated. And we know that we need to continually review our planning framework. So we're sort of continually reviewing our regional plan. And in a time like we are right now, where we're growing quite quickly and more quickly than we have in many decades, we need to decide if that planning framework has to change. So as a result of our population that's growing, where we need more housing, or to respond to things like climate change, or to apply an equity lens to the work that we do. So certainly there's, very rightly, it's long overdue, this sort of focus on diversity and inclusion, and especially on the, systemic racism that has been perpetuated against African Nova Scotian communities in this municipality for, many hundreds of years, really, but certainly it's percolated up into our planning framework over time. And so we're having to think about how we do things differently. I'll come back to that at the end a little bit, but just want to let you know that the plans are really not meant to be static. We have to change as our communities change. The one major policy in the regional plan is the urban transit service boundary. So it was the transit service boundary was first adopted when the regional plan was adopted in 2014. So it's a policy in our plan. There's a map associated, and then there's a policy in text as well. And that policy sets out that the transit service boundary is the area where HRM will direct future investment in public transit, with the exception of rural commuter express services that can extend out beyond that boundary. So the area that is covered by the urban transit service boundary is kind of also aligned with some of our, with our water and wastewater services. It's really the area where historically we've seen the most housing and jobs are located, where we expect that a lot of new development will be. So as we're growing as a municipality and we're thinking about, growing, some of you might have heard the phrase sort of up, not out. We're trying to make sure that as many people can live where there are already existing services, and that means sort of making sure there's opportunities to build housing kind of in that area. And that also means that our transit service, there's more transit service available in that area as well. And so as our population grows, staff work with community and with council to decide where new development might be located. And if we're growing in a way that we expect development outside this transit service boundary, or there are different reasons for why we might adjust it, recognizing existing communities as one example, we'll need to review that boundary if it change over time. So this is coming back to, these are changing plans and they get reviewed over time. I do want to mention that outside the urban area, the regional plan also sets out that we will have opportunities for a rural transit funding program. So Halifax Transit runs that funding program where community-run services, for example, Bay Rides and Musco Rider are two organizations that take advantage of grants that can subsidize the cost of operating those services. So there's sort of different models of transit service or kind of public mobility service outside of the transit service boundary. And so at this point, I'll pass it over to Con, and he's going to talk more about how Halifax Transit plans today for transit service inside this boundary.
Thank you, Leah. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. So now I'm just, going to focus on Halifax Transit service planning and moving forward together plan updates. So Halifax Transit plans and adjusts services regularly based on information and addresses them through weekly KPI report. We call it a key performance indicator report, and we prepare quarterly report. We also prepare monthly report like the monthly KPI, and we also prepare annual service plan. So if you see through the timeline, we have the kind of information updated every week, every month, every quarter, and finally annual service plan. And on top of that, we also prepare the long-term plans like the MFTP. We call it Moving Forward Together plan. Usually every 5 years, we revise the plan. So the Moving Forward Together plan was prepared in 2018, and it was for 5 years. at the end of 2023 and last year, it was kind of completed its journey, but the COVID actually hit. Because of that, it was deferred for 1 year. So officially, it will be continuing up to December this year. And my team is responsible to take the next plan to be prepared soon. Interestingly, as Leah mentioned, we had an influx of population growth in last 3-4 years. Because of that, we think like a 5-year plan may not be valid at this point to address the need of the growing population. So my team actually decided to prepare a kind of 3-year plan instead of a 5-year plan, so that we can revise if the population continues to grow in the similar fashion. And we do have some special plans, like we prepare like the propensity map and propensity plan, like where transit actually is kind of served really well, and where the service required more additional trips and those things. So that plan is still under a process. So if you go to the next slide, please, Leah. And the Moving Forward Together plan, what did it address? There were 10 corridor routes, 36 local routes, 20 express routes, 4 regional express routes, 3 rural routes, and 2 ferry routes. So those are the routes we actually planned in the Moving Forward Together plan that would cover within majority of the urban transit boundary, as you saw in the map. And some of the rural routes and regional express routes, they were served for a long time. And before the regional plan was prepared in 2014, those routes were existing. That's why it was still serving those communities. So the next slide, it will be showing the Moving Forward Together plan's implementation phases. So we made the plan for 5 years, and we actually could complete 97.26% of this plan. But this data actually came from July. So we started to prepare this presentation for July. So I considered until June. So this percentage actually updated up to 98.2% right now. So we are almost at the end. So by November peak, we'll be executing almost 100% of our Moving Forward Together plan. So what does this mean? It means whatever routes we planned, whatever services we planned, we could actually implement all those kind of services and routes to cater our ridership. And the next kind of slide, it just says about an annual service plan that we revise every year. And based on this, we received the budget approval from the council. So the plan proposes new service in growth areas and reduce inefficient low ridership services. So as I said, we monitor every week data, the monthly data, the quarterly data, and then we actually prepare this annual service plan. Like some of the routes are not performing well, then we need to reduce services. Some areas it requires more services because of the growing number of population. So if you take a look, the service adjustments proposed in 8 routes in last annual service plan, it was like route 1, 10, 10 plus means like 10 A, B, C. There will be new routes for 10. 28, 51, 51 plus, 56, 72, 192, and 196. And we added 70,600 total service hours, and that would cost more $4.91 million. So that is kind of an overview that we are planning through Halifax Transit. So I'll be transferring to Leah again for the next slide.
Thanks, Khan. And so what does this mean really overall, and certainly especially for communities that are outside the transit service boundary right now, or that might not have kind of the level of transit service that they'd like to have. So we know that because of that history of structural racism that I mentioned, that there are African Nova Scotian communities that were located on the edges of the urban area, and that services weren't directed to those communities over time. And so when I have been, emphasizing that we need to regularly review our regional plan to determine if things need to change based on changing conditions, based on, changing population. The African Nova Scotian Community Action Planning work is one way that we can help to think about these planning issues in a different way. I believe that you had a presentation from our team on that project this past February, but they're certainly happy to come back and talk about it again anytime. We also will have a report going to council soon, I hope, on the program overall and some of the work that we've been doing. But it's one way to recognize that the broader planning framework, doesn't work in the same way for all communities. And Council has adopted the African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity, and it's kind of an important foundational document for us to work with communities to start to realize some of their goals. So we'll work directly with communities, understand their priorities, and a lot of transit is coming up a lot in those conversations, and it'll be important for us to discuss with community what it means to have increased service or service in a place where you might not have before, because at the beginning I was talking about a sort of transit, where the transit service boundary is where we expect to see a lot of new housing and jobs and opportunities, and we need to work with communities to sort of fully flesh out all the implications. We don't plan for kind of one service in isolation, but kind of all of those things together. They're sort of like knitted together, and it has impacts. So we just sort of need to have these like open conversations. So I'm happy to sort of all I have for a formal presentation, and I'm sure Con and I are both happy to answer any specific questions that you have. And I will stop sharing.
I guess, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, is it Leah or Leanne?
It's Leah.
Leah, sorry, Leah. Going into the future, the transit plan for Halifax. I know, and I heard that there is a plan for a third ferry service coming out of Bedford into downtown. Is that still a thing? I know council was kind of flirting around with the idea. Is that still happening?
Con can probably give more information than I can, but yes, they are planning for a ferry service from Bedford, Mill Cove to downtown. There was a plan called the Rapid Transit Strategy, and it actually talked about more than just Bedford. There were a couple of other routes as well.
Right.
But that's the one that's got funding. They have funding. I don't know whether Con has any other inside information, but I know there is funding for the terminal and the ferries themselves.
Okay.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. So yes, we received the funding, for the, Mill Cove Ferry project. It's from the federal funding, and province is also part of that funding program. And this project is undergoing right now. We actually, are working closely with land acquisition in some areas. And as Leah mentioned, it's not only the Mill Cove ferry. There should be another ferry terminal in Shannon Park area. So that make it easy for people to commute to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And this project is already undergoing and has started already. The phases, those phases are still intangible. The tangible part will be coming soon once the RFPs and all those kind of things are ready.
Okay. And I have a follow-up question as well to that. I know Leah has mentioned in her presentation that the city obviously is growing. We're getting more people quickly. And I know a few years back, council was floating the idea about a commuter rail. Is that a dead issue, or is that still a possibility? Because I know in terms of our population, I know the province is pushing for a mill people in the next 5 years, I think the forecast is. So I was just kind of wondering if that commuter rail is still an issue, is it still ongoing, or is it dead in the water?
So the province has a separate agency, I guess, that's called the Joint Regional Transportation Agency. And so there was a commuter rail study a few years back, and ultimately it's challenging because CN owns the rail lines and they don't prioritize passenger, they prioritize the shipping. And so, or freight. The Joint Regional Transportation Agency is a provincial agency, but there are multiple partners. HRM is a partner on that work. They're developing their own regional transportation plan, which really could influence, actually have quite a bit of influence on how we're planning kind of big picture transit, also roads and all of these things. I have heard maybe rail might be in the cards. You know, they're doing a lot of engagement, and certainly they're hearing that people are interested in rail. So we'll see. You know, and it's a long-term plan that's intended to be long-term. So you know, even if we don't have something like that now, you can future-proof in the instance that you might be able to get it in the future. I don't know if Con, you have anything to add, but that's my perspective from the planning world, at least.
No, thank you. So I can just, through Madam Chair again, so I can just, you know, like add a few things, like JRTA will be probably bringing the report, like the Joint Regional Transportation, you know, like agency for the regional plan, and that should be, you know, like coming anytime soon in November or at best like December at the end of this year. And probably they will be recommending the rapid transit strategy aligned with, you know, like if there should be BRT, like the bus rapid transit, or LRT, like the light rail transit, you know, like, so we are just looking forward to, you know, like finding their proposal as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks. Those are all my questions.
I think Andrew had his hand up.
Good evening, everyone. So I have a few things. I'm going to ask a couple and then I'll make space for somebody else, and then I'll come back in with some more if there's no one. So in your presentation, I think, and it might be, I don't know if it's a regional plan question or if it's on the urban transit service boundary, but I guess my initial question is, why is it the case that the boundary basically ends at the African Nova Scotian communities? So I mean, looking at going this way, I see it over by Montague Road, and it goes up into Montague a little bit, but then it stops right when you get sort of into Cherrybrook. I mean, we've got Beachville in there. I mean, Africville is a whole nother question I'm going to ask about. But then I look at Lucasville Road. There's service at either end, but not in Lucasville. And then I'm looking at, you know, Hammonds Plains Road, Park Walk, Upper Hammonds Plains, etc. So I'm just wondering about the logic around how that came to be.
Yeah, so I wasn't around when it came to be, but I have a general sense of how it's aligned. So I talked a bit about how the transit service boundary is also aligned with all of our other services, so like water and wastewater services. So there's a map that's called the Generalized Future Land Use Map, and it sets out these kind of designations. One of those designations is urban settlement, and that's roughly, this is where water and wastewater service might be, and also transit service. So it's kind of aligning a bunch of these services together. And the situation as it is today is that the Lake Lewin, Cherrybrook, Preston Townships, Lucasville, Upper Hammonds Plains are not in that urban area where they have both water and wastewater service. And it was sort of the underlying assumptions of the 2014 regional plan. Well, and it was originally adopted in 2006, but we didn't have a transit service boundary at that point. Was we were, you know, put as much development as we possibly could in areas where we already had these like long linear pipes. Building more long linear pipes is expensive, and there was sort of some rationale research around, you know, it's expensive if we keep sort of sprawling outwards and outwards. Let's put as much development as we possibly can on the inside, and so that was kind of the rationale. But as a result, places that were outside of those boundaries, you know, are just by default sort of considered rural. Well, we know that's not really the case, right? It's like the sort of how the settlement pattern is organized is really different. Like our plan kind of calls, say, Lucasville rural, but that would be the same as Musquodoboit Harbor or Sheet Harbor. That obviously doesn't make any sense. So we have to start thinking about these kind of areas in different ways. But really, it was about sort of aligning those different services together. And I think that was the original rationale for why that goes together. It's like, this is where the most density is. This is where the most people live, the most jobs are. Therefore, this is the easiest way to service, we'll get most ridership if we have it where most people are living. And in a more rural area, settlement pattern is not as dense.
Okay, so that really doesn't make sense to me. And it ties into something else that I've heard many times over the years about, if you don't have water, that you don't have a bus. So that you kind of alluded to that a little bit, but see, what I don't understand is North Preston has water, and Cherry Brook has water, and Upper Hammonds Plains has water, but there's another issue there. But we're not talking about water tonight. That'll be for another day. So I just, from what you just said, I don't understand how they relate. That it just doesn't make sense to me. You said you're talking about these different services, but then they have those services, but still not part of the boundary. I don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
hard to
maybe I missed
explain
something
without
there.
maps, but it's also, there were decisions made about where different levels of service were provided. And, what I'm suggesting is that it's time that we kind of revisit some of that decision making. So, I'm not going to try to defend, I guess, where the boundary is drawn, because we're in a review process of our plans at the moment, and we're growing and things are changing. So, yeah.
And so then thinking about the when you were mentioning about, I've got two screens here, just a second here. So when you were talking about the plan, about looking at low ridership and looking at service adjustments and different things like that, one of the things that I've had trouble wrapping my head around for a while is, I guess, the logic between Route 401 and Route 370. So maybe Con can give me some insight on that, but I'm just trying to understand how and why those two routes exist as they do.
Yeah, I'm just looking at those, kind of map, because, I'm not that old in here in the HRM, so I still, getting familiarity with many areas. So what I understand, Route 370, right? You talked about 370, and you talked about 401, right? Yeah, so those routes are probably existing since 2009, before the regional plan actually starts in 2014. It was implemented, I believe. Leah, please correct me, if I'm wrong. So because of that, those routes are intact, before the plan. So the plan actually, when it was prepared in 2014, it actually had the boundary. And within the boundary, we started to serve after that. But before that, those routes were existing. So the council probably directed us to keep those, services at the time.
Okay. So
that's why it was. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So what I'm asking, I'll ask in a bit more detail, I guess. What I'm asking is, why is it that there is a bus that goes to Porter's Lake and then comes down to 107 and goes all the way straight to Halifax, but then the one that comes through East Preston only goes to Portland Hills? And in thinking about that question, you have to think about a number of the changes that have been made with transit. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because as different changes happen in transit, in this community, it became the case that if I want to go to Halifax to get to work, I had to go buy a car. So what I'm trying to understand is if I want to get that bus, it's not possible because it doesn't come into the community. It goes down and around the highway out to Porter's Lake. It's not a factor to the community. And so when I look at the bus that does come to the community, no, I'm not going to say that yet. I'm going to leave it at that first. I'll give somebody else some room.
Yeah, thank you. Through Madam Chair again. So what I understand, like, that route, we didn't, we did not have the direction to change, from the council, because it was the regional, before the regional plan, that route was there. So if we have to change something through, the riderships and all those other analysis outside of the UTSB, then we need, the direction from the council. And when the council directs us, then we can actually look into it. The same actually applies for like Route 320, it goes to the airport. But Fall River is kind of, like a place where a population growth is happening. And, people are asking, that bus to be going through that way. So still, it's outside of the UTSB. That's why we couldn't actually serve. So if the council actually, put a motion to, investigate that one, so we can actually investigate, and, the direction should be coming from the council. So we did not actually investigate that one. Like, okay, if somebody is living nearby, but he or she has to go to Portal Lake to park and then ride the bus. Leah, do you want to add anything for that?
No, I don't think I have anything to add.
So I'll just make some room if anybody else has anything. I got some more, but
and if I just add a couple of sentences more, we are continuously investigating again, like if there are some, demands coming through, and if the council actually, send us a motion, definitely we'll be looking into it.
okay. So in discussion, so when you say direction from the council, I find that interesting. Because in my involvement in my community, which is East Preston, just so we're clear, some of the work that we've had to do in the community to see improvements to the transit that we do have now came in spite of the work being done by the councillor of the area at the time, if I can speak plainly. So my question for you would be, if your direction comes from council and the councillor is working against the community in the work that they're trying to do, what is the community supposed to do in order to see that they're getting proper representation and proper access to the services that they're supposed to be provided in their community? That's my question.
I can start, and maybe can go. So certainly as staff, we take our direction from council, and all of the decision making is ultimately council's. But our role as staff is to do really robust public engagement. So we get typically initial direction from council to go do a piece of work, and then we would run that, and it would involve engagement, and we would consult with community in all kinds of different ways, and then ultimately we're preparing our professional recommendation and bringing it back to council. The local councillor is one voice of 16, so there are other councillors if you're struggling with your local councillor, certainly. But certainly from staff, we're making our professional recommendation to the council body as a whole. And we're trying to do as much engagement as we possibly can on, so that council is fully aware of the full range of issues. So, it's possible that the last time this was looked at, it was done in a different way. We have kind of different ways of working now, and hopefully more robust engagement processes. We've got, different ways of working than we used to in the past. So, I can recognize that it can be frustrating when your voices aren't heard. And so we'll do our best to make sure that we find different ways of working.
And so, and so I hope I'm making clear, and I'll speak plainly if necessary. But what I'm hoping I'm bringing across is that what is the, I guess, what is the work that's taking place within HRM that is going to be able to show that HRM is actively looking at how they can work within the Black communities and how to support the people in those communities, the groups that are working to better the community, all these different things. Because what I'm saying is that if we're up against the roadblocks of historic racism, if we're up against the roadblocks of, well, it's not in this plan, if we're up against the blocks of our communities are outside of the boundaries, that I'm just trying to make it clear that these types of things and these types of conversations, how are they happening in the community, or how is HRM looking at, or what, let me say it like this, what are the actual steps that HRM's taking so that we can see that they are making concerted efforts to look at the needs of these communities that we're talking about and how to better serve them?
Great question. And thank you for that. So I think we can get at this in a whole bunch of different ways. So one of the ways is with the community action planning work that I talked about in my presentation. We have done a lot of work already with the community of Beachville. We're working actively right now with Upper Hammonds Plains and Lucasville. I understand there's been some initial questions, I think, in East Preston, but we work with the Halifax Partnership and the Road Economic Prosperity Council on kind of their initial strategic plans, and then kind of the planning work comes a little bit later. So there's a lot of opportunity there and I think certainly the team working on that directly would be, I'm the manager of the team, but there are folks who are much more knowledgeable than I am on the intricacies of all of those pieces of work. I'm sure they'd be very happy to come back and give you a kind of update on presentation on the work that's happening there. So that's kind of one big thing. That's like at the community level, there's opportunities for a community to develop their community action plan, list the actions that it is that they would like to see achieved. And then some of those are planning things, some of those are other business units or departments or other levels of government, and how can we help to sort of coordinate some of that. So that's like one big thing. Then there's project-based stuff. So Con sort of talked in his presentation about the Moving Forward Together plan is at the end of its life and we'll need to be refreshing it. We're also working with the Joint Regional Transportation Agency on their regional transportation plan, and there'll be opportunity. We'll have to figure out how we're going to implement that whenever it's released. There's these like project-based things that we can come directly to community, we can advertise broadly and get public input in that way. There's all these like different avenues in, and it starts with conversations like this, but also conversations in community on kind of what the needs are. And so I'd say big picture stuff, but also there's like every project has usually an engagement component, and that's hopefully us coming to you and having frank conversations about what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so I'll ask one more from the presentation. So when you mentioned the rural transit funding and talking about Musco Rider and all that sort of stuff, what is the process for getting that established? Is it the case that anybody can just say, You know, we're going to start a transit group, or we're going to start a ride share or whatever, and then there's funding available to support that. How would people access that? What's the process around that?
Han, do you have that information? I am not involved in that process, but if we can get you the information.
No, thanks. That's a nice question. Actually, I'm not involved in that project and that funding program as well. Like our engagement team, like Cheryl Chappell, she's the manager, and she actually takes care of that one. And she presented in probably last council meeting about the rural funding program and how does it involve. So usually what happens is like the federal government has some funding and the municipality has some funding to match it. So in that way, like the community actually build a partnership program, and like they can get connected. So that's what I know actually. Very limited knowledge on that particular like piece.
I did a quick Google, and there is a pretty good website. So I just put that into the chat. It's just on the halifax.ca page. I just looked up Rural Transit Funding Program, and there's a lot of information there. So we're certainly happy to connect you with the appropriate staff if you're interested in that further.
Okay. So anybody else want to jump in? I still got more.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Sorry, Andrew. I have a quick.
Go for it.
One last quick question. I think Leah, you may have partially answered this while Andrew was speaking last time and asked some questions there about our communities. Maybe I missed it, or maybe I'm not clear. Just to get that clarity on the community engagement part, do you actually have people, representation from our community on your team, on your planning team, that could speak to some of the transit issues from various communities? Because the reason why I'm thinking that or asking that is because if we bicycle back 10 plus years ago, North Preston, East Preston didn't even have transit service to those communities, and I'm sure other Black communities were not included. So I'm just trying to see if we are actively including people from our community to be on your team to help provide that necessary information.
Yeah, I mean, our team is of staff is pretty small, but we do work actively with community members, and we're connected through the Road Economic Prosperity Council as well with different community members. So Devin Paris, he's probably been at this committee before. He's our African Nova Scotian Community Action Planning lead. So he's kind of the engagement lead. So he is like very tapped in with what's going on. And as we're hoping to hire new staff, we have approval from council for new staff. So as we kind of gear up, we'll be able to be in community even more and getting to know even more. But we've got, certainly lots of gather lots of information at all kinds of community meetings that we've been to, so that the issues and are well known. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for that.
So when it comes to Africville, I mean, we look at the map that you shared, the urban transit. You've got Africville right in the very center of the image. We know where the community is, and I'm trying to understand what the conversations have been around transit access or transit through Africville to be able to access the community, the park, the museum, all these different things. Because, well, I'll ask that then, and then I'll say something else maybe, depending on the answer.
Han, do you have any information on transit things? I don't.
Yes, thanks. I already had few information about that. Like in 2016, there was a report. A councillor actually directed his staffs to prepare a report to see the potential. And that report was prepared in 2016 2016, I believe. Like to see if Africville could be connected with transit. So there were some kind of recommendations in there. I can share that report later on if you want. But our new plan will be prepared and the process will be starting soon. And we actively, like considering, that piece, like how to connect that one in the plan as well.
Okay, so my understanding is that from conversations that have happened with Africville Museum, at least since I've been there, so I used to work at the museum, and this was part of the conversation that we were having even then, around the changes to different routes that could have been possible. There was conversation around, one route that would be changed would be adding another, 5 minutes or this or that. But what I'm trying to understand is when we have a place as storied as Africville, as recognized as Africville, National Historic Site, all these other different things, you can't get there. You cannot get there. I worked at Africville Museum for a year, and to be able to get to the museum, there's 3 different ways. You get off the bus at the end of Barrington, and you walk where there's no sidewalk till you get to Africville Road, or you get off at the very top of Nova Lee, and you go down through that path that's up there, down through the woods, under the bridge, until you get to the end of the road. Or you take, I can't remember the number now, but you take the bus going down, you go down Lady Hammond, and you get off at the top of the road by the car wash, and then you got to go walk all the way down, around, cross the tracks, past the city field, all the rest of it. And so my what I'm trying to understand here is, when these conversations have already been in the process, what is the process? That's my question. What is the process to go from saying, why isn't there a bus that can go to Africville? How come there are people who are visiting this city every day throughout the summer? You got thousands of people coming off of cruise ships and all the rest of it. They get off the ship, they're looking for, well, where's the Black people? And you tell them, oh, well, you could go to the museum, but how are you going to get there? You can't, because if our people who are trying to run tour buses, that got nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now. But that's my question. What is the process in order for there to be that service being provided to Africville? Because as I'm aware, it is something that's being discussed. And what I want to understand is, how can we, as this committee, bring that forward so that it's no longer being discussed, it's being done? That's the question.
So Leah, do you want to add anything in there? Because, thanks for that question. Yeah, it's I have heard this one several times, and what I read in that report, it was really from 2016, and it was like what you said. The walking distance was approximately 1.4 kilometer far, and definitely there was no sidewalk probably to go to that place, but definitely we should consider for our next plan. So that I'll be saying. And the engagement, when the engagement will be happening for our next plan, definitely will be requesting people to provide their feedback about that.
So I think what Con was saying is there's like an opportunity, as our plans are kind of due for review anyway, to take another look at it, since the last time it was looked at was 2016. I guess I would defer to Krista if she's here, like on, what kinds of motions. Like certainly you folks are a committee, so you can ask for staff reports, you can, do things. So if you wanted some kind of like formal response, we're certainly able to share materials. We can share materials. Con can share the report that he's referencing with the committee afterwards. But if there was like something specific that you wanted to know or recommend, I certainly would. I don't know the process. I don't want to like step into the clerk's role here, but as I understand it.
Just for process, so the board or the committee, sorry, would make recommendation through the executive standing committee, and it would be for a staff report if one didn't already exist. If there is information that you're seeking that staff may already have, we can certainly work with them to provide additional materials to you if there's something specific that you're looking for.
The last thing I'm gonna ask is about the I guess sort of the KPI, the reporting, that sort of thing. So what are the factors when it comes to your planning and developing the next plan and all the things that we've talked about? How do those reports factor into that planning? So for instance, I'll use East Preston as an example. So from experience, I know that the bus that exists currently has fluctuating ridership depending on which one bus it is, to be clear. And so what I would be wondering is, when you're developing this plan, are you developing it in a way where you're looking at it to say, if we do X, Y, and Z, we might see ridership increase in this region? Or are you looking at it to say, we already see that only X, Y, and Z are using the bus anyway because of whatever the factors may be? So I just want to get some understanding on that, because with the level of service currently for my own community I'm talking about, I'd like to know how those would factor into those decisions positively.
Okay, thank you. That's a nice question through Madam Chair. So the KPI reports we prepared, the weekly and the monthly one, we just, review them, and monitor the, system, where the riderships are happening mostly, if there are overloads happening somewhere, if there are delays of the services, those things we actually consider. And then we, for the quarterly report, we present it to TSC, our Transportation Steering Committee, in the council. We present every 3 months. We actually present that report, like the Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So then the council actually directs us, okay, there should be some improvement based on the data, and they direct us to, improve the service, and then we actually recommend there what to do. So that's the way, we actually try to monitor our service, the existing service right now. Does this answer your question, Pete?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you.
So, can we move on? Perfect. I think that's a yes. So, we're now at 9.2, committee member updates. I'm gonna invite Andrew to lead the committee on discussing the format for the work plan meeting.
Okay. So yeah. So if we're done there, thank you for the presentation and the information.
Yes, thank you.
So the work plan. So we moved the work plan to the next meeting, And so the reason I suggested that is because since I wasn't at the original conversation that you guys were having about that the first time, I was suggesting that we would do it in the same format, which this is different from. So that's where that logic is coming from. So I just want to highlight that to say that we're going to do it next time when we're in person. Well, I mean, I guess not if, because that's how it is. But yeah, so that's where that went. If we were looking for that this time around, we're going to look at that on the next meeting.
Perfect. And then
Oh.
added item. Oh, sorry.
There's one more thing that I forgot to mention earlier.
Okay.
Because I don't know if it's an actual addition.
Mhm.
But the question came up earlier about the what was it that we were talking about? The term for the chair. So my understanding is that's a year term, and so we should start, folks should start thinking about who's taking it up next time and all those things. I just want to put that out there and think about it because we're going to be doing that.
Andrew, do you have any interest in the chair?
I didn't say that. Anyway, that I just want
About
to
it.
I just want to mention that so that we're all thinking about it.
Yeah.
Andrew, just going back to the work planning discussion, and something that we had just sort of looked at during agenda review planning was whether or not this session you wanted it. Does the membership want it to be held virtually? Do they want it in person and live streamed? Do they want it held in person but not live streamed so it can be more not as procedurally, a more free-flowing discussion is how we put it in the past.
Mm-hmm. So that, I guess that's a question that we're asking now.
We are now moving on
Everyone,
to. Oh,
just hold on now.
sorry.
So I'm looking for input on that question. The question of the work plan meeting being not live streamed, being in person. So that's how it was last time. That's my understanding. So the question is that how we want it to be next time? That was my assumption, but we're asking that just to be clear. If everyone is okay with that. Yes, Daryl.
I feel. Oh.
Yes, me personally, Andrew, I think in person is a lot more productive for free flowing conversation. That's
I
just
agree.
my opinion. But yeah.
Seeing some notes. So we're good with that. So we're gonna do it the same way last time in the next meeting in person at Alderney. Everyone's good with that? Yeah. Okay. So Krista, you've got that?
Yeah, and it's just the question whether or not you would like to live stream or not live stream.
Don't we have to live stream it though?
Not necessarily. That is up to the committee.
Okay. I'm okay either way.
Yeah, I agree with you. In my humble opinion, I think live stream is good. I mean, we're public knowledge, so all the others have been, or the majority of them, I should say. So
Yeah, and just for public clarity as well, there is still a record of the meeting. There's still very public meetings. Members of the public can attend these. There is a recording that's taken. It's just whether or not it's streamed to YouTube or not. If you do stream, we would need to be in the horseshoe just based on the camera setup, or we could explore other locations. The Harbor East Marine Drive Community Council space is currently the only location that can be streamed at this time, other than a virtual platform.
Hmm.
What about chambers at City Hall? Is that ever available?
Not to our advisory committees, but also we're currently undertaking the chamber refresh. So that wouldn't be an option. Regardless, it's not an option at this time for our advisory levels.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
So then we're going to, I guess, live stream it and then it's going to be in person. Is that what we've concluded?
I'm not hearing otherwise, so that sounds about right to me.
The next thing is our next meeting is October 10th. There'll be a presentation from the African Nova Scotian Community Action Plan team on their recommendation report to council. The next meeting is October 10th, 2024. And then number 12 is adjournment. Can I get a mover to adjourn this meeting?
Oh,
Yeah, I'll move it.
Yeah.
Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you, Daryl. I guess meeting adjourned.
thank you.